The mortgage holiday cliff. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, because I'd like to have a look at this article written by Tarek Brooker for news.com.au discussing mortgage deferrals and how they're a ticking time bomb. Remember those little things that have been, well, handed out to a lot of people and have been extended into next year? That we're not, well, one would argue that perhaps the RBA is just a tiny bit premature in saying that the recession is over when all of these unnatural interventions in the marketplace are taking place. Did you ever think the banks would be so kind and so generous? We know why. It's not out of, generosity. It's the fact that they're protecting their assets. They don't want to see a hit to property. The RBA's modelling of a 40% hit. All of these news pieces discussing potential property hits. Then, of course, the government springs in. JobKeeper. Then you've got all these stimulus. Then you've got Home Builder. And I'm just waiting until next year we'll see Mortgage Keeper. Don't worry about it, guys. Future generations can pay for it or work for it. Or the only price you'll have to pay is the complete destruction of the purchasing power of all of that money you've invested in. All that hard work you've done now is just worth nothing. So banks are chasing mortgage payments, and economists say we're pretending if we think everything's okay. What's next for our crumbling economy? In the classic fairy tale, Cinderella, the fairy godmother, turned Cinderella into a princess with a magic wand. But only until the clock strikes midnight. In many ways, Prime Minister Scott Morrison and the banking regulator, APRA, have acted like a fairy godmother for the nation's mortgages and SMEs, small to medium enterprises. They've used their magic abilities to change otherwise concrete rules surrounding financial regulation and loan repayments to make bad loans good and offer an unprecedented number of loan deferrals. See, he's right. But this is the problem about making any predictions or anticipating the market or thinking how things are going, because we're not in a free market. Not at all. We're in a manipulated market. We're a market where we have interventionalists coming in and managing and massaging and playing with the cash rate and buying things with money out of nothing. And they can have all of these unintended or intended consequences. One could argue, that's fantastic. It's great. Let's just smooth the curve. But then, one could also say that hampers innovation and locks us into perpetually repeating the same cycle again and again and again and again and again. But like the story of Cinderella, the magic illusion of low mortgage arrears and good times underpinned by government support will fade when the clock strikes midnight. However, unlike the fairy godmother, APRA and the Morrison government have already waved their magic wand again to extend mortgage deferrals from their initial conclusions in September and October to March next year. This has even been dubbed by some economists and financial experts as a strategy of extend and pretend. That's good. I like that call. Effectively ignoring what would otherwise be a US subprime crisis level of mortgage arrears and hoping that some way, somehow, things would improve. We're seeing also with the Westpac just announced a huge cut to their earnings, a warning. So we'll see how the banks come out. If the money they've put aside for these losses, or that they're prepared for these earnings hits, if that's enough. According to the latest data from APRA, around 1 in 11 mortgages and 1 in 6 small to medium business loans are currently being deferred. That's a scary thing. Businesses deferring their loans, because their businesses employ people. They employ people. They create jobs. If businesses start getting in trouble, this hope for a V-shaped recovery isn't going to materialize. I really think it's going to be the middle class that cops it the most. It really feels like it. Of the 393,000 mortgage holders with their loans currently in deferral, the RBA has estimated around 15% are at the greatest risk of not being able to resume payments when their deferral period ends. However, the household survey data from research firm Digital Finance Analytics paints a much more concerning picture. It suggests the proportion of mortgage holders who will not be able to resume repayments may be significantly higher. According to DFA's survey, 60,880 households will not be able to restart their mortgage repayments, with New South Wales leading the nation with 38,884 households who will not be able to resume their repayments, Victoria with 15 and WA with 5. Which is interesting, because WA was, from this all the data that we're looking at here, at a higher arrears level than any other place in the state. Well, WA and Northern Territory. But then again, New South Wales and Victoria, you know what that means? That means Sydney and Melbourne. Who are we kidding, guys? Sydney and Melbourne. There's nothing else in New South Wales and Victoria. And if we bring up the property prices, you can see how much they've grown in the last 14 years. And why the property always goes up meme, why people have built an entire career just on property, because they've only known one trajectory for it. How are they going to handle a correction? How many of them will start spruiking online get-rich-quick schemes on YouTube where you can drop ship to anywhere in the world? Forget the fact that shipping's gone up over 50%. Don't worry about that. So, households that cannot restart their mortgages, and there you go, from DFA. Oh, Queensland, we're not doing too bad. But, I mean, interesting. Look at it. The ones that are in trouble the most have the huge, insane property prices. Let's look at the median house values. Look at Sydney, 866. Victoria, which is Melbourne, 678. WA, where's WA on this chart? Perth, 439. So, that's worrying that Perth is on the chart, or WA is on the chart, sorry. Come on, you know, all of you in Victoria and New South Wales know that you're just the support mechanism for your city. And I'm sure that's how a lot of the North Queenslanders there feel, that how all of us on the southeast of Queensland think about everyone else. I'm sure we don't, although our politicians seem to sometimes. So in recent months, a sizable number of borrowers have resumed their repayments according to the ABA. However, hundreds of thousands more borrowers will still face a nervous wait. The state of the economy in the coming months will be key to how many can come to alternative payment terms with their bank, such as interest-only or hardship provisions. I think it'll be interest-only. I think what they'll do is the bank will do whatever they can to slow this forced sales. They'll do whatever they can to stretch it out because they don't want to see a run on property. So it'll be interest-only. I'm half expecting the government to push for, we need to grow Australia, and a big push to have more people come into the nation to come in and buy up property to keep the bubble going. But we'll look at another video later today about, well, there's no populist support for that anymore. Otherwise, some of those borrowers may end up joining the almost 61,000 households which DFA has included will not be able to resume paying their mortgages. I mean, have your spending habits changed, guys? What are you doing to prepare? Have you got are you ahead on your mortgage? Have you got an emergency reserve fund? Have you got cash as well put aside? Or are you just, struggling to go for it? Or just spending like there's no tomorrow? People are saying in the comments. I went shopping the other day and it felt completely normal. There were so many people everywhere. There are a few shops that were, looking a bit sorry, a few empty, but you wouldn't tell that we're in the first recession in nearly 3 decades. There is speculation that APRA and the banks may choose to further extend loan deferrals beyond the current March 2021 end date. However, eventually struggling borrowers may need to come to alternative terms with their bank or consider selling the property. But the banks might if they just have 100,000 people paying interest only. They'd love it. Fantastic. You literally rent your money, your property from the bank. Or is that, wait, that's the World Economic Forum endgame, isn't it? With turnover in the housing market near its lowest level in over 30 years, a significant increase in levels of stock on the market driven by forced sales could place downward pressure on house prices. And we can see here's the housing turnover rate. So it includes estimates of unreported transactions. Recent observations are subject to large revisions. And of course, it's ABS, CoreLogic, and the RBA are combining the data. Well, there you go. Yeah, where's the last recession? Back here. So we're worse off than that recession, guys. And then what happened? Right up to 6%. Then boom, 8% in the mid-90s. So this is when people started to feel it. Right here. This is when they started to feel it. But if we were to stop the story here, that would only be half the tale. At the end of March next year, JobKeeper and the mortgage deferrals are slated to conclude. When that day comes and the clock strikes midnight, we'll finally be able to see what damage has truly been done to our economy and household budgets. Exactly. We've got no we've got no idea what's going to happen until that date. So prepare. Prepare. That's it. Prepare. You know, hopefully it's all going to be fantastic. Some miraculous thing will just shoot the... I can't even say it. With figures from Treasury indicating that over 3.5 million workers are being supported by JobKeeper and around 1,300 businesses are newly applying for JobKeeper every day. Ooh, that ain't good. It's clear that what we find when the dust settles will not be good. Figures from Roy Morgan's recent unemployment report are already painting an alarming picture of what that may lead. During September, 56,000 people lost their jobs. 152 chose to give up looking for work and left the workforce. Now that is the biggest problem right there. Because then your unemployment may not look too bad. Because they're not looking for work. Oh, well then we don't calculate them. We don't calculate them in the figures. They're not part of the workforce. They're out of the workforce. Meanwhile, ANZ is forecasting headline unemployment to rise to 9% by mid-next year and remain at almost 8% until after mid-2022. So here's the unemployment forecast. There's Target. Oh boy. There's ANZ. There's the Eco-Fiscal Update. RBA. I mean, there you go. Nothing's looking good, is it? With so many workers potentially facing unemployment in the coming months, it's possible we may see a second wave of struggling borrowers seeking to defer their loans. When this time comes, the property market will face a perfect storm as struggling borrowers stare down the possibility of being forced to sell their homes or investment properties at the same time. While we can assume the banks and Morrison government will do everything they can to spread out any forced sales over the longest possible time period, the scale of transactions may prove too large for the property market to absorb without prices falling. But like every other market, housing is defined by supply and demand. If the government were able to engineer sufficient demand for property through Home Builder, the First Home Deposit Lending Scheme and other policies, it's possible that the impact of the inevitable forced sales could be quite limited. Well, Home Builder, it's putting demand not for existing stock, but the First Home Deposit Scheme, that's the thing. The government will step in to try and prop it up and try and save people. Predicting how this will play out in the coming months ranges from problematic to near impossible. Government and APRA may follow the lead of other nations and continue to extend and pretend, potentially kicking the can down the road for an additional 6 months or a year. The RBA could step in to provide support to the banks to keep borrowers in their homes even after they've defaulted on their debts, as was seen in the US after the GFC. Ultimately, the coming year will prove pivotal for the nation's housing market and our banks. Perhaps Australia's property market will be protected by the magic wand of APRA and the Morrison government, emerging relatively unscathed. Or maybe this time the storm is simply too powerful for even the magic of government and banking regulator intervention to overcome. So I think it's quite an insightful look at the impending mortgage cliff that we're going to have. But the problem is, even if the government intervenes and does their magic to keep, the property okay, or only a 5% hit, maybe a 10% hit, maybe a few outliers here and there, we'll still all pay for it one way or another. We will always pay for it one way or another. The pipe always comes calling, everyone. No intervention is without a price. No deal with the devil isn't without its consequences. As always, let me know your thoughts and opinions on the comments down below. Let me know where you think housing is heading. Do you think they'll just keep kicking the can down the road? As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you're a fan of the channel and want to support the content, there's a few ways you can. Simply interact. Sharing really helps the channel grow. You can support us financially by joining on YouTube or Patreon, using any of our affiliate links below at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. Buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.